Hi everyone, welcome back to second episode of Life Sucks Then You Die. And this episode is, we gonna focus on, why am I doing this series, this journey, this, endeavor. And suddenly it became very cold in Korea, like winter weather. So I'm wearing something very, long and hot, and I hope, my life today, will not be so like, suck. Okay. So why am I doing this? So, in order to speak about that, I want to go back to my childhood again. When I was little, I grew up in a rich area of Korea, and I was surrounded by the similar type of people. Well, life was kind of easy for me, and I really didn't think that for example, relating life to struggle, pain, and all these things. I was always thinking life was something that you build up. However, I want to actually talk about also why I'm a person who I am this age, and all my life. I read a lot of books. I don't know exact number of the books, but my personal room was about the size of our living room, which is was very big actually. So it was like a playground for me, and three sides were bookcases. My father is an architect, so he designed this this room, embedding all three sides of the room into a bookcase. So I had a lot of books. I had a book, like very old books, old Korean books, like beyond, like, I think it goes back to like 1920s, 30s, like that, brown paper books, which has like, writings, top to bottom, not, to side. And I read it, I'm gonna admit it, I was a nerd. I don't consider that, I just love books. And books opened up, a lot of, places, a lot of imagination, a lot of this, new ideas. As a child, when I say as a child, like kindergarten, first year of elementary, second, third, fourth, fifth, until that time. And even after, I read, I think daily, at least 2 books or 3 books every day, so I grew up with books, and one side of that room was a kind of a small garden. My mom, like, she loved this Japanese flowering, so she went to actually Japan to learn that, and she has some kind of a group 1 or stage 1, like a license from Japan. And she has all this like fake flower making and artistry type of things. She was very, very good. And then she decorated that area with her flowers, like live flowers and fake flowers, all all alike. So I grew up with the books. I grew up with books even called Potato. That Potato that title, actually is a very famous book in Korea. Talks about inequality and power, used by, bad people to abuse and control the less powerful people. And, that that book I read when I was in second grade, and then I internally formulated this idea. I want to change the world, and I'm from that background. I'm from that, kind of a privileged background. But the type of people that I saw at the time, other than like only few, I didn't like them much. They always, have this, arrogance, and I thought, that is so below, But what I learned now, as I get older, you know what? Even less powerful people, they act the same. And even, people without power act the same. So anyway, um, uh, I grew up in that kind of situations, and then suddenly I was moved to U.S. I when I immigrated, I want to point out, it was for the better, reason. My mom, wanted me to have a better education. Korea has a good education, but it's a different type of education. You don't think in Korea, you only digest the things that you are given. In US, that fitted me so well, because the US education, like high school, junior high school, college alike, you have to think and throw questions to get answer. That's how they train you. And better the education is, then that's what you go more. So but very different things I've seen in US. I've seen life, true life, true essence of life, struggles. I've seen abuse, for the first time in my life. I've seen my friend getting abused by his father, and that's beyond my understanding at the time. And I've seen racism, experienced it. So if there are any people that really never experienced racism, and like you're visiting, like nowadays, Korean people go to different country and they call it, call a lot of it as a racist, behavior. However, most likely not. Most likely that's a misunderstanding because you have lack of understanding of different culture. But true racism, right away, and it's very threatening. All that. So when I experienced that, I realized, I have to be that person that when I was little, I want to change the world, so I always wanted to become a city council of a city, because I want to protect immigrants. I want to protect my type of people, people who are Asian, background, Korean Americans, Japanese Americans, Chinese, and all other Asians. I wanted to represent them in a city, where they don't have any political power. That's what I kind of experienced as soon as I moved to US. And it was a little bit overwhelming in a way. However, the story that I'm going to talk about right now is something that actually changed me throughout like the decades, not years. Not one incident just changed the whole thing, but my thinking structure and formulation of these ideas have been changing last 20, 30, nearly becoming, I think, 40 years now. I mean, less than 40 years. But so I had a friend, he is not a close friend. We just went to high school together. One day, he asked me to speak to him, and then he suddenly started to talk about his problems. And you know at the end, I cannot disclose what his problems were. At the end, he said, I'm going to quit school, I'm going to drop out of high school. And you know what, I grew up as a nice person. I try to understand others, and I understood him. Whatever he's going through is not easy. Not easy for me, not easy for anybody else. Not easy for him. So I couldn't really say, like very, like with that kind of, no, you cannot drop out of high school. Instead, I kind of embraced that idea. I kind of told him, what can you do? It's beyond you. It's something that, we cannot handle. It's like your decision, but I don't want you to, drop out, high school, but, that's, something that you have to decide. I mean, sounded very fair, sounded very, kind of understanding. And, after that, he dropped out of school. But, let me say, what is, what has changed in my mindset from that point until now, every year. And now, sometimes I cry because of him. I could have actually told them, don't quit, don't drop out of school. I should have actually. It's not my fault. I know it's not my fault, but I should have told them, this will pass, and you don't have to quit school. Let's get like hold on to it together. I should have done that, but I didn't. And that is what's haunting me, last 30 years at least. And then, let me explain, what happened. So he dropped out of the high school, and, first year, he drifted away. He just, disappeared in a way, from my life. And I forgot about him. I was busy with my life, and, I felt bad. Sometimes, time to time I thought about him, but there's no way for me to contact him, so I kind of, let it go. A few years later, there's this, BCD, Puchangdong, Sundubu, that, tofu place in LA on Wilshire Boulevard. This building used to be a, drinking place, and that drinking place actually, was a little bit, I think, kind of a hideout for kind of this bad boys of Koreatown. So I'm sorry, I've been there one time, so I, that's why I know it as a first point, person point of view. Sorry, Ma. No, I went, I kind of, know very different, like array of people, so I hung out with, good people, bad people. That's who I am. I'm a super insider. Not anymore, but I'm a super, I was a super insider. So, however, that drinking place, back in the days, were filled with, bad boys and, people like that. And, but it was never that kind of, gang hangout, but, there was a big, kind of a, not drive-by, because it was, there were people inside of that drinking place. And this, I believe that was the Vietnamese gangs, came in and then, like shot people with machine gun, AK, I believe. No, not AK, but who cares? So when that happened, somebody, like, I think, one or two people died, and then few people got hurt. And then that was very big news, at the time. And at the time, I was a college student, so, I was away from, like Koreatown ideas. I was only focused on, very much on my filmmaking and, like, many different, things, that was going on with my life. But I saw on TV, that, this happened. And then this was a very, big news, because there was a, person, died. And then, so it went on for a few days, and then I saw it, and then I felt, okay, it's none of my business, so I stopped thinking about it. And then a few years passed by, like, I think like 2 years, or maybe 3 years passed by. And I have another friend, who's on that borderline, hardworking at the same time, semi-gangster, gang banging, friend. You know, I actually, at the time, I was involved with the ministry where, we tried to get, gangsters out of that system. So, he was one of my kind of, target. And he suddenly said, "Oh, you went to uni high, right?" And then I said, "Yes." And then he says, I knew somebody from that high school, and he's no longer alive." And I asked him who, because at the time everybody was connected, so I wanted to find out who that was. And then suddenly he mentioned, that, friend's name. And then he said, "Do you remember, or do you know, there was this machine gun, like incident, in Koreatown, that place? I think the name of the place now, I kind of remember, Icon, I think." Huh. So, that incident, that happened? And I said, "Oh, I saw on TV." And he said, "That was him." It hit me so hard at the time. I didn't know what kind of emotion that I was going through, because I told myself all my life, I will change the society. I will change people. I will help people. He was calling out for help. In a way, I ignored it. I was just a nice guy. I just ignored it. And, that hit me on the day. When I heard that was him, like 2 seconds, I blamed myself at the time. Because I just remembered our conversation right before he dropped out of high school. I should have asked him to come to the Bible study that I was in charge of. Instead, I embraced it. I sent him to that simple life. You may say I didn't, but that's how I feel. So that hit me on that day. And then again, I forgot about it. Again, I made it into this, thing that I should remember, what not to do in my life, checklist. $10 years later, 20 years later, 30 years later, until now, I almost died, so many times, but, I've lost a lot of my friends, even my brother, to sickness and, many different reasons, accidents. And, I regret, to have that sincere conversation. So now I'm just a sincere guy, people who know me now, they always perceive me as somebody who always talk about that hard, heavy, you know, to them, a lot of them feels bullshit. How come in this series, I speak this word bullshit so many times, but I became the sincere, person because I really want to help out. I really want to take that moment. I really want to, you know, be sensitive. Even when I'm joking, I try to gather information, to understand that person's what they might go through. I mean, it's not my responsibility, but that is God-given responsibility to me. So this very serious person now that I am, but one of the reason, that is also one of the reason that I don't say harsh thing to people. Instead, I try to still I believe God embraces us, so I embrace other people as well all the time. That's what God tells me to do. But I tell the truth. I tell you have to change this, but embrace them. Before, I just embraced them, but now I tell them what it is. And I really do pray that people would change their ways around, so that that you hit the bottom and turning point happens. So that is why I'm doing this series. I don't know who you are, what you're going through. I may know some of you, but I don't know most of you. I don't know even if you will ever listen to this far, but I want you to understand one thing. I almost died 3 times. I'm gonna go through that life or that situation again in 3 months, and all that very difficult things were there and will be ahead of me, but it passes. I want you to understand that it passes. And people who are giving into that situation or that feeling, bad feelings and all that, what, they don't survive. Only the people who go through that situations and go through that with with a more positive reaction to that situation, they survive. And not only positive, knowing where all that coming from. It comes from the Lord. You have to understand it. If you even if you are an atheist, I want you to now repent. You know why? Because none of what your actions, however you think is and will be, and whatever you do, is ever changes anything, ever do any meaningful things in your life. You are so big-headed with these ideas, but unless you know where life comes from, you just gonna end up, I will say, you're gonna end up at the bottom of your darkest fear. And at the time, you cannot control it. So before that happens, I want you to get out of that ideas. Get out of that situation. And the only right way to get out of it is Jesus Christ. Why? Because he died for us. He bled his blood for us. You know how powerful that is and meaningful that is? You may not understand right now, but that creator coming into the human form, and then die for us, go through the same pain. Some people say, oh, he was a God. If he was a God, they actually taunt Jesus about it, make fun of it. But if he was a God, he probably didn't feel a thing. No, he came in the flesh, just like one of us. So a day before that crucifixion, he prayed to his Father to take that away from him. But at the end, he knew exactly what he was, here for. But do as your will. That's what he said. So he died for us. All the struggles, all the pain that we have, where does it come from? You have to understand it. Because you don't understand it, you are just, saying crazy things. All these evil things coming from devil. Your father abusing you, saying wrong things to you and hit you when you were a child. Your mom, running off, with, somebody else, or, there are a lot of this, like, oh my gosh, my life, I'm sorry. That's human. Our struggle, all these dramas in this world. Who creates it? Who directs it? Who writes it? Who started it? It's the devil. So if you understand that clear, dividing line between good and evil, and unless you declare that evil drama will be burnt away, and it's not going to affect me anymore. If you don't declare it, you know what? The devil's going to control you. Devil's going to have a chain on you, and you will be like slave for all your life, thinking, oh, I can do this. That self-improvement, BS. No, you cannot. Because that evil power, evil idea is far, bigger than who you are, who you will ever be. It's going to be very hard for you to just, get over it by yourself. You have to change the turf. You have to be planted in a better land, knowing where the sun light comes from. Where does it come from? Sun, not from you. No matter how bright you are, and you put a lot of makeup so that you're whiter than like other people, and shines on everybody, like all that, like TV commercials, where your skin shines, and I'm sorry, my skin doesn't shine. But all that doesn't matter, because you're not gonna put one single light out. You don't have that power. Only so I'm reflecting God's love to you. I'm reflecting God's truth to you, because that's the source. And the experience that I went through, yes, it's a very long experience, but very, very, in a way, some people may say, oh, that's not really related to you. No, it does. I make it to my business because I love people, as Jesus did. I love people with the struggle. You know what? That is God's given mission to me. So what is your mission? What is, your purpose of life? And if you don't have it now, how are you going to make that into your life? How are you going to make your life purposeful? Bible. Go read it. If you have a hard time, ask me. Ask, nearby church pastor. All of us, we have problems because we're human as well. But at least we're trained in somewhat. Pastors are trained in, biblical, understanding. I am more, uh, what can I say, street level. So please, I want you to go back to the basic. Good and evil exist. That is a, very important understanding. And, you know, you have to, you have to, you have to be changed. Most of us, we have to change every day because our struggle goes on every day. All right. It's been too long. So, see ya. Take care.